Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in e-discovery and related areas.
Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Each Friday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, I host an episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select Resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest this week is Sheila Grela. Sheila is a paralegal at Procopio, Cory, Hargreaves, and Savitch in Southern California in San Diego. She has been a paralegal for a number of years now at a variety of firms, including before Procopio, Dentons, McKenna, Nicholas and Tomasevich, and Kennedy and Sousa. She also is an active volunteer. She is especially active with the San Diego Paralegal Association as a vice president there. She's an assistant director of the San Diego chapter of Women in eDiscovery and a member of the board of advisors of EDRM. Sheila, welcome.
Thank you, George. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm glad you are able to join us today. I would like to, the topic for today really is all things paralegal. And I would like to start with that at the beginning, because what better place to start with this question, or these two questions. One, what is a paralegal? And two, what do paralegals do?
The definition of paralegal recently was changed by the ABA to remove the designation of legal assistant. But to me, it's always been the same. It is someone who's qualified by education, experience, to assist attorneys in tasks that they're delegated. The definition of a paralegal changes based on the type of firm. And I know I was joking about it before we started, but the Department of Justice, state of California, does not use paralegals. They have chosen to give paralegals a different name. They give them the name legal analyst. And to me, that is the real issue. If you distinguish a paralegal from other support staff, the need to actually do analytical work distinguishes us from the administrative people on the staff. However, I will say there are some legal secretaries who put me to shame when as paralegals, because it's not necessarily what title you have, it's the type of work that you do. So, but as everyone knows, in California, we now have a business and professions code that goes over our requirements. And that is not the case for all of the United States. But I believe that the tasks done by paralegal really relate to the type of firm you're working for, the type of case you're working for, and how long you have been a paralegal. I know I personally feel that many paralegals are underutilized and that the tasks that they're provided are not as wide-ranging as they could be. One of our recent guests for Virtual Lunch with Leaders, Dennis Garcia from Microsoft, discussed his paralegals, and I was surprised to find out that Microsoft encouraged them to get certifications in privacy, as an example. I know that I really personally would love to see paralegals assist attorneys and their employers more with risk management issues and compliance, because I think paralegals are really good at finding what's missing and what the problem is. And I realize the attorneys will always be responsible for determining the risk, but finding the factors for the risk, it really should be something that we can help with. And I know I'm hoping that people begin to see paralegals that way more and more comprehensive tasks.
With any position, whether it's an attorney, a paralegal, any other role really in the legal profession, at some point people need to get trained initially and then ought to be getting ongoing training as well. What thoughts do you have about training in paralegals?
Well, I was very, very lucky. I worked at a firm as a file clerk when I started. And one of the legal secretaries noticed that I was reading the local rules and doing several things. And she asked me, "Are you really interested in this?" And I'm like, "Yes." Then she said, "Look, if you see a pleading or you see something you want to understand, put it aside, put a note on it, and then come see me when you're making your rounds. And if I'm not busy, I will spend the time and explain it to you." She was good to her word. Maggie Nixon started me on the path of realizing I could learn a lot by myself, by observation. And I know that when I am approached by someone who is, "I got my first job," I always say, "Okay, if you're a computer person, yes, you can do it on the computer, but I like those little compass books. Make notes, make a note of what questions you have, of what things you want to learn. And the most important part of it is you can go back and cross off the things that you answered the questions for, or you teach yourself, because that gives you confidence." I know that with the pandemic, there's been a lot of discussion about the next door neighbor training kind of falling by the way. And yes, that is definitely a problem for many paralegals and many other legal professionals, because when they get stuck, they're not quite sure where they should go for help and whether or not they look like they don't know what they're doing. And my response to anyone who has a question is, there's nothing that you shouldn't be able to ask, because once you understand it, it expands your abilities for the client and for the firm. So I try very hard to encourage paralegals to understand that asking questions about things in the process is very, very important. But I also understand from the other side of the coin that if we're trying to get information from attorneys, that is problematic for them, because taking away billable time can be a huge issue. So I know that one of the things I learned to do many years ago was to make sure I asked the attorney, "How do I find out from you about X? What methods do you want me to do if I need further direction? How can I do the next step if I need further direction from you and you're in depot? How do you want me to take care of this? Who can I go to in the office if you're not here and I need a practical instruction?" Attorneys are more than willing to give you information, especially if you use that horrible phrase that we learned to use very early on, "I don't want it to affect my billing. Please don't let this affect my billing." And I tell the paralegals, that is really an important thing to say. If you want to get an attorney's attention because you need help, tell them how it's going to affect your billing, and they will find a way to get you help.
So it sounds from what you're saying as if an important part of training and paralegals is a whole set of mechanisms by which the paralegals can train the attorneys.
And definitely vice versa. I know that when I was really fresh learning paralegal, I was helping with a lot of demand letters, and they had provisions in them and they had contractual ideas that, because I'd never been to law school, I didn't understand. And I really wanted to understand enough to make sure that when I was going through the pleadings, when I was gathering everything up to help with getting the letters together, that I didn't miss anything. So I know some attorneys were like, you don't really need to know this to do your job. And I learned how to express to them that I did need to know this to do my job, and that I truly wanted to understand things as we were going. Now, I know that's called on-the-job training, and that phrase is not embraced in the legal realm. And I have the distinction of having a husband of 40 years who has gone from being an aircraft mechanic to being a curriculum developer. So many of the things that I have learned in the last 3 or 4 years about training and learning have been from him, because he became the lab instructor, he became the teacher, and now he does the curriculum development. So he's really given me a different insight into the questions that we should all be asking ourselves when we're trying to teach someone. One of the things he says to me all the time is, you can't teach for an hour. What you're really doing is giving sound bites and changing things as you go. So I know, and I adopted some of the things that he talks about when he's teaching. I know he will suddenly throw out a piece of candy to one of the guys and say, hey, you want to talk about this slide? You know, the whole thing of engagement while you're trying to get people to pay attention. And I know yesterday I heard Craig Ball say that when he's had to teach a class that's 7 hours, he worries that there's not as much value in that because it's hard for someone to sit for 7 hours. So on-the-job training of little bitty pieces actually, to me, gets more for people, but I'm concerned that people need to learn how they can ask questions and how they can get the information without it being a problem. So my favorite thing is everyone talks about software. Love software. However, I always say, well, you know, you don't teach math with a calculator. You gotta start with the principles, okay? If you're going to teach someone calendaring, you don't tell them, here's the software and it does this and that, when they don't understand the concepts and what's the difference between calendar and court days, and how quality control is important, because missed deadlines and problems with calculating deadlines has an effect. All they think they're doing is running a piece of computer equipment with a software program that does it. So the importance of some things kind of have gotten lost in the picture of trying to do it. I had the benefit of having some great legal secretaries train me. I took legal secretary classes in addition to becoming a paralegal, because as far as I was concerned, if I didn't understand how to calendar, I didn't understand what pleadings were, I didn't understand this. And the respect that these professionals deserve many times gets put on the wayside. Well, they're not billable. That might be true, but how much value do the attorneys get from the work that they do? It's just, it's so great. They are the unsung heroes of law firms. I know that many paralegals are trying to move from legal secretary to paralegal, and I applaud them, because it's hard to shift from not doing analytical work to doing analytical work. And I know that I personally think everyone who's in a law firm and wants training should first of all ask themselves, how do I ask for it? And believe it or not, I literally had a virtual lunch on that. How do we ask our bosses for training? And what do we do to get the training? I know ACEDS is a great example of an opportunity to ask your employer for training. And there are steps that you can take and things that you can do. And I recommend any paralegal who wants to understand e-discovery and does not have a chance at their firm to do it, to look into the programs, to talk to someone, to ask for a mentor, to determine what steps they can take on their own or with help from your employer. Now, there are some things that are provided by ACEDS and Douglas Company together that employers shouldn't say no to, because it's a training program for many different softwares, and it is a great method for you to up your skills, which that phrase is overused right now, but I do like it, upskilling. Your co-employee, Kat Casey, loves to do that. And just as a soundbite, on the 3rd of September, she's coming on Friday, and she's going to talk about upskilling. Now, why is upskilling important? Next year, when you go in for your review, you're going to listen to your boss talk about all the things they want you to change, all the things you did well. And one of the responses you should be able to have is, I was here last year, I'm here this year, and this is what I did. And it is also important to try and get buy-in for whatever you're doing. So if you're wanting to have a paperless office, you can't do that without buy-in. I mean, and that's a really simplistic example, but it is an issue. You want training, but the training doesn't mean anything unless you're going to get to use it. I do understand that. But there's a lot of training and a lot of opportunity available. And I want to let everyone who's on here know that ACEDS answers every email. Now, when I say that from someone who needed this more than you could possibly imagine in 2014. I was studying for my ACEDS, and I'm telling you, they would call me, they would talk to me, they would ask me where I was, what did I need. I know that they care about whether or not you get the skills, the knowledge, and especially the understanding to do your job better.
So ACEDS, of course, is a resource to which folks can turn as they try to upskill themselves, if we can use that as a verb. What other resources are available out there, whether they're in California or elsewhere?
NALA. They have great resources. They have great short webinars that range in the subject of litigation all the way to patent law. They even have people come in about special social issues that are going on, whether it be diversity or access to justice. Recently, they had their second virtual conference, and they are outstanding at not only providing the material that everyone can use to upskill, as you said, but they're also outstanding in the fact that they are trying to promote the profession as a whole, which sounds like, well, why do you need to promote it? Because a lot of people still don't know why a paralegal is important to the practice of law. And I can kind of understand it, because in their mind, the people they see are the attorneys, and that's the way it should be. But the attorneys have a team backing them up. When an attorney stands in court on the first day of trial, the amount of hours that are behind him from the paraprofessionals, the associates, that to get him or her ready is astounding. So I just think that all of this kind of plays in, and NALA is really good about doing that. And I know I recently, failure is always important. I did not get elected to the NALA board as a board of director at large, which is what I wanted. But the president called me and asked me if I would mind being on the continuing education committee. Oh, not a problem. So I'm actually happier with that. But you know, we all have failures, and we all need to figure out where it's going to take us next. So I was very happy about that. And I'm also very happy to say that there's so many things from the pandemic that have changed or evolved. I know I mentioned it before we started. Los Angeles Paralegal Association has a Tutor Tuesday for the paralegal students, where they virtually help them with their homework. San Francisco Paralegal Association has an ongoing series called Skills, and they're trying to incorporate listening and learning and doing exercises so that people actually get a value of it. And I'm kind of a little selfish on that. I get to do one of those with Carol Buckner from our firm, and she's going to be doing it on the unauthorized practice of law. And it's really going to be very good because it's 2 hours as opposed to a short webinar, and it's going to be an engaged discussion about how and what do you think of this. So the changes during the pandemic on the type and the breadth of education is invaluable. I mean, this particular series, I could sit there and tell you what I have learned every week for the last few weeks and from who and how. But the real issue is we all need to choose how we're getting our information. And that's a problem with the pandemic. And it comes down to how do you get your mentoring when you're not seeing anybody.
So what other changes have you seen that have come with respect to paralegals that have come out of the pandemic?
I believe that many people are giving us more respect. And I think it's because suddenly they believe that we can work on our own with supervision and still be productive. I think it's always been the case, but I think it's just become more clear that is so true. And then the other thing that has happened is the empathy level. And I know we talk about it and everyone says we all now get to see each other's personal lives. I think it's more than getting to see each other's personal life, because we could always ask more about people's personal life. It's the fact that we realize that they go together. And I know our saying or motto for the year for Virtual Lunch with Leaders is personal growth through professional development. You can't separate the two things. You cannot say, I'm going to only work on my personal life and I'm only going to work. They affect each other. And the balancing is the acknowledgement to me that you have to be able to have a personal life and a professional life at the same time, but it doesn't mean that you can completely segregate them. And I think people have come to understand that more during the pandemic.
How about the flip side? Things we have lost, at least temporarily, as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I think we've lost a few things permanently, unfortunately. And the sitting next to me, training me thing, may be one of them. And it's also because when people finally come back to work, they're going to be so used to their space that it's going to be hard to let people back in. I happen to be one of those people that I don't like anyone behind my shoulder. And it's just, I've always been that way. It's not that I mind someone seeing what I'm doing. I don't. So I get it, but I have been really trying to not be like that because I happen to have people who will walk in my office and will look at, and I know I got 1,000 views over my joking post about the fact that my boss came in and saw my Excel spreadsheet and said, what does true false mean? I'm like, don't worry, it's math. But yeah, the camaraderie of the training together and sitting, which is another reason that I really want to push for team training.
Yep.
And I don't mean, that the team games. I mean training as a team.
So explain more.
Okay. Attorneys do not adopt what doctors have adopted long ago, postmortems. If there is a case and it's over and there's been a trial, and even if you win or you don't win, use the project management language, lessons learned, whatever method you want to do, asking what I could have done better, what could have changed? Why did this not work as much? Were this many hours on this particular thing, was it worth the value? There are so many questions. And one of the reasons I think it doesn't get asked is because the attorneys and administrators want to move on to the next project. But if that were an element of the requirements for every team to take a pause and look at it, it would make them better. And I think adopting the medical attitude of this is not about tearing anyone's work down. This is about asking ourselves what we can do to make the next project better. And I know it's not the politically correct thing to talk about a case as a project. I apologize to those of you who are offended by that. I just think that they are projects myself.
Personally, I didn't even know people were offended by that concept.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm not working on a project. I'm working on a litigation.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand why you think that, but there are a lot of people who the terms that they use for their work become more important than we could understand. So it really does matter to many people about what title they have. So I have a quick question for you.
Okay.
When we discuss all of this, if I were to suggest that one of the problems with not having enough education is that people aren't willing to sit down and do workbooks like, Craig's workbook or this workbook, because not only are they time consuming, they don't see a value. What do you think that I can do to explain the value more than I presently am doing? Because that is a goal that I'm having a hard time reaching. So
I'll try to respond, but with a big caveat, which is I don't really know what you're presently doing.
Okay.
But let me go wind the clock or the calendar back many years to the first law firm I was at, and a major undertaking at that law firm, which was rolling out PCs to all the attorneys and all the staff. Huge undertaking. And we had a consulting firm advising us, as well as an organization making sure that we actually had the computers and they could run and all of those things. The advice we were given was to set aside at least one room as a training room, fill it with computers, desks, and chairs, and develop a curriculum, set up a class schedule, have people sign up for classes, show up for the class, sit there for the hour or whatever the block of time was. And there would be a progression of classes they could go through. And it all sounded very familiar. And why wouldn't that work? So we rolled that out, and very few people showed. People signed up, not as many as we hoped. Of the ones who signed up, very few showed up. Of the ones who showed up, many left before the time was over. Of the ones who stayed, many forgot what they supposedly learned by the time it actually was time to use it. So we threw out the whole approach. And instead, we kept the trainers, we kept the curriculum as a framework, but this was before internet and the like. We set up an internal hotline. Anybody who had a question about how to do something in connection with technology, whether it was word processing or I don't care what it was, called that number. We would then dispatch a trainer to that person's office or desk to sit down alongside with that person to help that person solve the immediate problem. And by solving the immediate problem, learn some skills in a real world context, in a situation where learning those skills had a high value. And they could be put in place immediately, which meant that possibly the person doing this now with the trainer sitting in the next chair over next time would remember what to do instead of having to call the trainer a second time. Our trainers were pretty busy at that point. They no longer were sitting there in rooms with crickets chirping. I don't know if any of that translates to what you were thinking about.
I think it translates greatly because it's just a different method of the chair next door training. And I really appreciate the idea because I know that I recently mentioned something during one of the clubhouses about the fact that the way where people aren't feeling intimidated to ask questions. And if the service is being used by everyone, people won't feel intimidated. That's the component I like about the story you just told.
So the last question I had asked you was a bit of a downer question. I have this final question to close with. As you look into your crystal ball, the same murky crystal ball we all gaze into with cataract eyes as we try to figure out what the future will look like, what is the biggest positive thing you hope to see in this whole world of paralegals in the next year?
I think it's a combination of caring and collaboration. I think that is going to continue. It is going to be more and more of those two things working together to get better results, whether it be for people's personal lives, their professional development, the firms that they work in. Both those things are going to continue to grow as we see how much we need them.
Well, thank you, Sheila. Sheila Grela is a paralegal at Procopio, Cory, Hargreaves, and Savitch, if I pronounced all those correctly, and even if I didn't. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Thanks, Sheila, for joining us today. And for you in the audience, please join us again next Friday when our guest will be my colleague, Ralph Nitsch, who is VP of Customer Service, or Customer Success, rather, at Reveal. Another very important, sometimes not sufficiently recognized role. Sheila, thank you very much.
It was great talking to you.
Likewise.